welcome to another rap video. We're looking at Philippians chapter 1 today. Let's just dig straight in. I'm going to read verses 12 to 14 of chapter 1 of Philippians. Now, I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. And because of my chains, most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. So Paul's talking about something that's happened to him. So what is that? Well, we think it's the scholars, all the people who know these kind of things, think that most likely Paul's writing this letter from prison in Rome. He's in prison because he was trying to tell people about Jesus, and then they sent him to Rome so he could appeal to the emperor. But that's not the only bad thing that's happened. On the way there, he was in a shipwreck. He's had a pretty rough time. But what Paul is saying here to the Philippians, this church who he knows and loves, is that actually, it's okay that he's having a bad time. It's okay that he's suffering. Why is it okay that he's suffering? Well, because of what has happened, the gospel is being furthered. If we look at verses 13 and 14, we see what's gone on. Paul tells us that the whole palace guard, everybody who is looking after him in this prison, knows that he's in chains for Jesus. Paul has used that opportunity to talk to everyone. Every single person in that guard knows about Jesus because Paul is using the chance he's got. It's really difficult and he's in prison, but he's still sharing about Jesus. But that's not the only reason that that the gospel's been furthered. He tells us as well in verse 14 that because of my chains, most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. Paul's realized that because he's in prison, and in prison he's still sharing his faith and he's still talking about Jesus, the other Christians who aren't in prison have been given confidence in Jesus. They've been given confidence to continue to talk, because if Paul can do that in prison, and if God is still using that, then he'll do the same for them. Now, we're not saying it's easy for Paul and that actually it's really easy to be in prison and it's easy to go through these things. Not at all. But what Paul is trying to show the Philippians is that the gospel relativizes our circumstance. So Paul's been through all these really difficult things, but he's telling us, and he's telling the Philippians, that the gospel is more important. So because of his prison, all the bad things that happened, because the gospel has been preached, then he's going to rejoice. He's going to celebrate that is the case. It's really helpful for the Philippians to know that. The Philippians would have been suffering at the time. They've been being persecuted. The people around them would not have been happy with them. So what Paul is telling them is that, you know what? Even though you are suffering, the gospel will be furthered. And that is a good thing. So it helps them, and it helps us today. If we look at our situations around us and we think, this is just so hard, it's so bad, nothing can be worth it. If we're still firm in our faith, and if we're living for Jesus, then the gospel will be being proclaimed, because people will see that we're doing something different, that we're living our lives for another reason. And if the gospel is proclaimed, or even if the gospel is known, then that puts our circumstances into the correct vision. It puts it into its rightful place. The most important thing in our lives is the gospel. Whether that's being preached or whether that's just that we have it. That is what Paul is saying. An example in my life is last year my sister died. And that is still so hard and so hurtful and so sore. But I can rejoice in the fact that at her funeral, I was able to stand up and say something, and her old minister was able to stand up, and we shared the gospel. We used that horrible circumstance, that awful thing, but we were able to share the gospel because Becky would have wanted that, and because Jesus wants that. All of her friends who aren't Christians then heard the gospel that day, and we can rejoice in that fact, and we can pray that God will continue to use that in their lives. It doesn't make it okay what what my family lost. It doesn't make it okay that my sister had to die. That isn't what I'm saying. And it doesn't make it okay that Paul's in prison. But when the gospel is preached, it makes us see there's something more important than our own lives. There's something more important than what we're going through. Because the gospel is what God sent to share. And if we can share that, that's the most important thing we can do. We're not going to have time. You can read the passage again. So pause the video when it comes up, read the passage again. Then a few questions will come up, and then some prayer suggestions, and then I'll come back at the end to pray. Let's pray to close. Father, thank you that you are a good God. Thank you that you have sent us the gospel, and that we can rest easy in the knowledge that if the gospel is being proclaimed, or if it's even just known, it puts our circumstances into the right view. We can trust that no matter what we're going on, your gospel is the important thing, Father. So help us in the tough things going on around us in this current coronavirus climate and everything that's going on. Help us still to proclaim the story of Jesus and to tell people about him. Give us the wisdom to know when to say things and who to say it to. And Father, we just ask that if any one of us are in a particularly tough time right now, you would show yourself to them, that your spirit would move in their heart, and that they would know your presence and know the truth of your gospel, how great that is. In your holy name, Father. Amen. That's a wrap.